Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as I understand it, my first task as the opening speaker is to make sure that everybody has the same understanding of today's motion, which is this House believes that we shall have a post-human economy run by robots with artificial intelligence within 20 years. Now, I'd like to focus very quickly on the phrase post-human economy and what exactly do we mean by that. Is it that the world is going to be run by robots and us humans are just going to be robot slaves? Or will the humans still be in charge, but we'll have robots doing most of the jobs? So we've discussed with our friends here from the Cambridge Union, and we decided to go with the second of the two definitions. So don't worry, the humans are still going to be in charge. I guess in movie terms, for movie buffs who are in the audience, we're talking more iRobot with Will Smith rather than The Matrix with Keanu Reeves. So if you keep that in your mind, you'll have it right. So anyway, now that we've established that, what I'd like to do is spend the next 8.5 minutes or so convincing you of three things. First of all, that it's technologically feasible. Secondly, that there's a very strong force leading us in that direction. And thirdly, there's very little that we can do to stop it, even if we don't like it. Now, I should say I'm not at all a scientist. I have no real specific knowledge of robotics or artificial intelligence. But there is one thing that I do know, and I suspect that I'm not the only person tonight in this room who in the past has systematically underestimated the pace of technological advances and their adoption by people. If I think back to 1983, when I was a young banker with JP Morgan in London, I remember our department got its first ever IBM PC with floppy disk, and that was installed in our department. And the person who was running the London office at the time, Sandy Warner, came on one of his walkabouts, and I was chatting with him, and he looked at me and he said, you know, Edward, within 3 years, we're going to have one of these on every single person's desk in this bank. So I didn't say anything. I looked at him and I thought, this guy's completely lost it this time. And of course, he hadn't lost it at all, and that's probably why he later went on to become the CEO of JP Morgan worldwide. Another thing, take music. I mean, I come from a generation where hi-fi was everything when I was teens, early 20s, and the important thing was to have a very big power amplifier and the biggest speakers you probably could find to have the best sound. And so when I saw that people were starting to put music on telephones, I thought, what's the point in doing that? I mean, it's going to sound rubbish. And of course today, digital music has become the de facto standard. So now when I read about future technological evolution, so the idea of having robots or 3D printers in production facilities, having artificial intelligence replacing bank clerks, taxi drivers, travel agents, and in fact even lawyers, because they can look through, they can see precedents far quicker than most humans can, and soldiers being replaced by smart weapons, then I have absolutely no doubt at all that it's all technically feasible. But the question is, what will make it all happen? Well, while I don't know much about robotics, I do happen to know something about economics, business, and international affairs. And I put it to you that there's a simple force that will push us towards this outcome, and that is human greed for power and money. In my experience, economic forces always dominate. Growth is king, and in fact, it's just a simple case of supply and demand. So, if people can get better products or better experiences at a cheaper price, they'll pay for it. And for companies, if they can find a more efficient or a lower cost way of producing things, then they'll implement changes. So if we take a look at the choice between a robot and a human, well, I would imagine that robots probably make fewer mistakes than humans do. As far as I know, robots never take sickies. And certainly robots won't get drunk at the Christmas party and make inappropriate advances to other robots. So on all those counts, I think probably the robots would win out. And then the other advantage that I see really with robotics and artificial intelligence is scalability. So, let's say that someone devises a system for doing medical diagnostics and suggesting treatment for people, and it works really well. Then that's something that's very easy to replicate. And so there's a very powerful economic argument there that instead of spending years and years training more and more doctors, you just take something that's done and you copy it. And so there are very, very strong forces that I think will make this happen. Now, if it does, I think there are a couple of consequences. The first is that ownership of everything will become increasingly concentrated amongst a few techno-savvy entrepreneurs, probably some we have here tonight. And the second thing is that a huge numbers of unskilled and even skilled workers will actually become redundant because they'll be replaced by robots. Now, in the past, this has never really been a problem because they've moved. During the Industrial Revolution, people moved out of the fields and they moved into factories. And then as the information age dawned, they moved out of the factories and they moved into the services sector. And the principle behind this was that there's always something that humans can do better than machines, mostly up here in the brain. But with artificial intelligence, what happens when machines can manage information and cognitive processes better than humans? Well, then I would argue you'll have an increase in wealth inequality, you'll have a bunch of rich billionaire tech-savvy entrepreneurs, and you'll have a mass of unemployed people who are actually probably then unemployable. So what could prevent this from happening? Well, as I look around the world, I don't see any system that has yet proved capable of preventing inequality. If we look at Western democracies like, France, the UK, the United States, I would say, inequality may even be increasing at the moment. If we look at ex-communist Russia, you've got Putin and you have the oligarchs who are far richer than everybody else in the country. And even if you look at systems under dictatorships like North Korea and Venezuela, you see exactly the same pattern there. And so the only thing that can really, I think, fight against this is if you have a rising of the unemployed masses in the form of kind of revolution, like what happened in this very country here in 1789. But what, I ask you, if the masses can actually be controlled and kept happy so they don't even want to revolt? And another interesting aspect of this is that scientists are now viewing happiness more and more as a biological process. And why not? Look, you see the number of people who take antidepressants, that works. And there's a huge drug trafficking industry, and that shows that people are prepared to spend their money to buy drugs which will change their mental state. So if you could have an economy which is strong enough and productive enough to feed all these people and could keep them supplied with virtual reality games because they won't have anything else to do, then maybe you can use this new medical technology to keep them docile by rigging their biological systems and keeping them happy the whole time. Now, do I think this is an attractive proposition? Hell no. I think human experience is made up of highs and lows. I think it's important in developing character and making life worth living. And I don't think it's very interesting for people to live in a permanent zombie-like state, to have their lives controlled by algorithms that probably know what they want better than they do. But then again, hey, maybe I'm just a big old dinosaur and my time on the earth is up. But my point is this, it's that even if you view this as an unattractive outcome for many people, it doesn't mean that it won't happen, because the forces are there to make it happen. So I leave you with three premises. The first is that robotic and artificial intelligence technological advancements are going to arrive, and they'll arrive quicker than we expect. Secondly, the laws of economics give an impetus to them being adopted. And thirdly, whether we like it or not, there's really no obvious mechanism that can act as an effective brake to this process. So I would say that if you agree with these three propositions, and I hope you will, then you have no alternative at the end of this debate but to vote for the motion. Thank you.